Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars, welcome to another of my classic film reviews. Today's classic film review is for the 2002 horror thriller The Mothman Prophecies, a film that is directed by Mark Pellington and it stars Richard Gere, Laura Linney. We also have Will Patton and Tom Stoviak. Now, this film is based on true events, so it says on the cover, and it is in actual fact based on true events or supposed sightings of this so-called Mothman in a place called Point Pleasant in West Virginia. That happened, I think it was in the 60s. I watched a bit of the documentary on the DVD. I've just picked this up on DVD. And I think it was in the 60s and stuff. And I think the film is based on a book that was written by John Klein, who is the character played by Richard Gere in this film, who is a journalist. Who, in the film, his wife is killed. Deborah Messing. She's killed right at the beginning of the film. She has a vision, she sees the Mothman, and she ends up being in a car accident with Richard Gere, and she basically dies. Not straight away, but soon after. Richard Gere, 2 years later, is still mourning the death of his wife, and he's on his way to interview some governor or something like that, and he ends up in West Virginia, Point Pleasant in West Virginia, which is not where he was heading at all. And he gets embroiled in all these strange occurrences, all these locals that are witnessing this Mothman, and the more he investigates, the more he learns what this could potentially mean. And it could potentially mean that there's some tragic event heading their way in Point Pleasant, because all the reports seem to indicate that when people see this Mothman, it means there is a tragedy on the way, and it is up to him to try and figure out what's going on and hopefully stop a tragedy. Right, The Mothman Prophecies then. Well, this film, I do remember when it was released, and I don't remember it getting great reviews when it was released, and I know it didn't do particularly well at all. And it's one of those films that's kind of gathered pace since its release. It's one of those films that you watch that you're constantly uncomfortable. It never lets you get comfortable, this film. There's always something, there's a way it's been filmed, something visual going on, something audible going on that keeps you on edge watching this film. It's quite masterful, really. And while it's hard to describe this film as full-on horror or straight-up horror, it's probably more of a thriller than a horror. But the horror, when it rears itself in this film, is quite disturbing and quite upsetting, and definitely creepy as hell is how I would describe this film. I watched it with my wife, who'd obviously never seen it. I've only seen it once, I think, years ago, and I remember it creeped me out at the time when I first saw it, and this, watching it second time round again, it just really creeped me out. It's a really odd film. Okay, number one, I like films generally where, you know, when they claim that they're based on true events. And I know a lot of films these days, well, anytime really, you know, they stretch that truth quite a lot. And certainly Hollywoodize the facts and things like that. And I'm sure they did in this film to some degree. But there's a bridge disaster in this film that happened in real life. Many of the accounts that is described in this film happened in real life. They're based on real eyewitness accounts, things like that, and that creeps you out big time. It really does. It's not a film you can relax when you're watching. And Richard Gere, I mean, I'll be honest, I've never been a huge fan of Richard Gere. I think at times when I have watched some of his films, I mean, Pretty Woman, forget it. I'm not interested in that sort of romantic comedies, generally speaking. But I liked him in Internal Affairs, which I've just done a classic film review on recently. Liked him in this. I actually liked him in the dancing film he did, Save the Last Dance, was it? I can't remember what it's called now. The one where he's with Susan Sarandon and Jennifer Lopez. I remember my wife dragging me to the cinema to see that, and I was dreading it, but I actually quite enjoyed it. and Officer and a Gentleman, I think it's a great performance by him in that. I do think Richard Gere is a talented actor. I'm just not, generally speaking, a big fan of a lot of his back catalogue of films. But here is excellent, about this really grief-stricken journalist that ends up in this weird place with all this weird stuff happening that may or may not be connected to the death of his wife, and he becomes obsessed with learning the truth, regardless of, you know, where it leads and what it does to him, you know, psychologically. And he does a pitch perfect performance here. Laura Linney as well is great in this film. I've always liked her. She's a very, very reliable actress, and she plays like the sheriff, I think she is, in Point Pleasant, who is like an anchor for Richard Gere. Very strong character, very level-headed character, doesn't understand what's going on, has taken many of these accounts from these locals about these Mothman sightings, doesn't understand it, and she kind of enlists him to help investigate what's going on, really. And she's like this anchor for him. She's a really, really grounded and great character. But just the very core of this is just listening to people telling stories. And Laura Linney tells a story about this dream she's having about drowning that becomes prevalent later in the film. That it's just creepy. It kind of makes you go cold when you listen to these people tell these stories in this film. And it's almost like it's like sitting down around a campfire sometimes with some of the stories that people are telling in this film that they dramatise in the film. When they're explaining it to Richard Gere and they dramatise it, and you know, you go a little cold. It's like you're a kid again telling ghost stories around the campfire, and it just gets under your skin. This film, it's a really, really clever film, and it is a film that deserves to find an audience after all this time, in my opinion. And it is definitely a film you should check out if you like these sort of horror films. It's not full-on horror; it's more thriller than horror, but it's really creepy. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. A really, really good film that you should check out if you haven't seen it before. So that is my review for the Mothman Prophecies. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you like this classic review, and of course I will be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.